Christmas night in my parents' immaculate Denver home always felt more like a stage than a celebration, and this year was no different. The table glittered under crystal lights, every dish arranged to impress the guests my father wanted to impress. My hands trembled slightly as I said, "Dad, Mom, Camilla, this is Noah, my boyfriend." Camilla's eyes swept over him, his simple coat, worn shoes, before she smirked. "This is who you're proud of? Makes sense for our disappointment." Laughter erupted. Dad added, "Lily always chooses safe, small things." Everyone stared at Noah like he was a joke. He didn't flinch, just studied each face, calm and unreadable. He was about to say one sentence that would change everything. But to understand why it mattered, you'd have to know. Christmas was never magic for me. And maybe that truth began long before I was old enough to understand what a holiday was supposed to feel like. I grew up as the first child in a house where everything, every expression, every outfit, every birthday, every gesture, was curated for how it might look on someone else's camera. For a while, when I was little, I didn't notice the imbalance. I was a quiet kid, happiest with a stack of library books, a set of colored pencils, and the cardboard models I used to build cities out of. I loved designing tiny skylines, little streets where I imagined people lived and breathed. Back then, I thought if I was good enough, polite enough, helpful enough, maybe I could build a space for myself in my own family's world. But when Camilla was born, 4 years after me, everything shifted like someone had reached into our house and quietly recalibrated the center of gravity. Suddenly, the conversations were softer around her, the lights brighter, the cameras always ready. I remember the first time my mother, Elaine, took a picture of me holding Camilla. She adjusted my hand because "your fingers look awkward," and retook the shot until she found an angle that made my little sister look like a cherub in my arms. After that, I was rarely in the frame, unless I was holding her, supporting her, or standing behind her like part of the scenery. "Camera loves her," Mom would say, brushing Camilla's hair while the baby giggled and grabbed at the comb. "Such a beautiful little star." Our walls began filling with framed pictures of Camilla in every pose, in her tutu, at her first pumpkin patch, smiling with a frosting-covered face at her first birthday. I was in almost none of them, except the unflattering backgrounds. Half a shoulder, the edge of my sweater, a blurry profile. I wasn't necessary anymore, except as an accessory. By the time Camilla could walk, Mom had discovered Instagram. I think that's the moment I officially became invisible. Mom turned our home into a curated showroom, with Camilla as her featured product. "My perfect girl, Camilla," the captions always read. "So blessed to be her mother." Meanwhile, I was the one cleaning the kitchen after the cooking for content. I set the table before the staged brunches. I held the ring light. I reshot the videos because Camilla blinked or the lighting was off. I ironed the dresses Mom wanted her to wear for themed holiday posts. When guests came over, I was the one running back and forth refilling glasses while Camilla sat on Mom's lap, basking in praise. "She's such a princess," people cooed. "Look at that smile." I smiled too, because good daughters smile. But the older I got, the more I realized how the world inside our house worked. There were only two categories: the one who was adored and the one who was useful. The older I grew, the heavier useful became. If Camilla spilled juice, I cleaned it. If she broke something, I took the blame. If she threw a tantrum, I was scolded for not watching her. If she got praise, I learned to step aside so I wouldn't steal attention by existing too close to the spotlight. It wasn't always brutal, but it was constant. A slow drip of "you're less than" that shaped the way I saw myself. My father, Richard, wasn't obsessed with social media the way Mom was, but he cared deeply about appearances, how the family looked to neighbors, to colleagues, to the world. He liked things neat, presentable, respectable. And for reasons I still can't fully explain, he decided early on that Camilla represented everything polished and promising, and I represented everything messy, inconvenient, and disappointing. When I made small mistakes, accidentally dropping a plate, forgetting to close the fridge properly, getting a B+ instead of an A, he would sigh, disappointed, as though I had committed a crime rather than a normal childhood slip. "Lily," he'd say quietly, "why must you always make things look bad?" But when Camilla lied, broke rules, lost things, or caused chaos, Dad's reaction was entirely different. Mom would swoop in with a protective arm. "She's sensitive," she'd insist. "She's just tired. Lily, can't you help your sister clean this up?" Camilla grew up learning that her missteps were quirks, while mine were failings. And when a child is told repeatedly that her worth hinges on never being an inconvenience, she learns to shrink in every direction: her voice, her needs, her dreams. I remember one Christmas when I was around 9. Camilla had accidentally knocked over the tree while chasing the family cat. Ornaments shattered everywhere, tinsel dragged across the floor, the angel on top lying face down. Dad walked into the room, saw the mess, and immediately looked at me. "What did you do?" I froze, unsure whether explaining the truth would help or make things worse. Mom swooped in. "Sweetheart," she said to Camilla, lifting her into her arms. "You must have been so excited." "Don't worry, Mommy will fix it. Lily, get the broom." Moments like that weren't rare, they were the pattern. I don't think Camilla was born cruel. Children learn cruelty the same way they learn language, by listening, imitating, realizing what earns them love and what earns them trouble. In our house, Camilla learned early that belittling me brought her praise, laughs, or at least a pass. I learned the opposite. There was a time, maybe when I was around 11, when I won a small art competition at school. My cardboard model of a solar-powered city earned first place. I came home glowing, clutching the certificate with both hands. Mom glanced at it, said, "Oh, that's nice," and placed it under a pile of mail, not even on the fridge. But that same week, Camilla participated in a school fashion show. She didn't win anything. She tripped once, but Mom posted 43 photos on Instagram with captions like "proud of my shining girl" and "our future star." That was the night I truly understood. I could excel quietly 100 times, and it still wouldn't shift the axis of our family's affection. Camilla only had to smile, and later, as we grew older, the roles cemented further. I washed dishes while Camilla posed for photos. I did chores while she lounged on the couch. I was scolded for speaking too softly, too quickly, too much, or too little. Camilla was praised for simply existing. Dad once told me, after a minor argument, "You make things so difficult. Why can't you be more like your sister?" I didn't know how to answer him then. How do you explain to someone that you cannot become a person who has been handed an entirely different life? Looking back now, I can see the roots of everything that would unravel years later. Camilla's entitlement, my silence, the imbalance so normal it felt like gravity, the shaping of the golden child and the disappointment. It didn't start in a single moment. It was built brick by brick, year by year, in small humiliations and quiet erasures people outside our walls never saw. By the time I reached high school, the roles inside our house had solidified so deeply that even breathing felt scripted. Camilla continued to be the bright center of every room, orbiting effortlessly through attention and affection, while I became something like the quiet background hum, useful, unnoticed unless I made the mistake of wanting something. But high school did something to me that childhood never had. It showed me possibilities outside the house. I discovered architecture first, through a teacher who let me borrow old textbooks and who saw the way I lit up when she explained how buildings weren't just structures, but stories told through lines, weight, and light. Later, I discovered data science, environmental engineering, sustainability, fields that asked big questions, demanded discipline, and could actually change lives. For the first time, I felt a pull toward a future I could build on my own terms. I would stay late in the school library, sketching city layouts, scribbling diagrams, or reading about renewable energy systems while Camilla filmed TikTok dances in our backyard under curated fairy lights. Whenever Mom scrolled through Camilla's videos, she'd gasp with delight. "You look just like an influencer already." While I sat in the corner, flipping through used engineering books I'd bought for $2 each. Dad would nod approvingly at Camilla and say, "She knows how to present herself. That's important." He never said that to me. And yet, even then, a small part of me believed that if I kept studying, kept working, kept dreaming big, I might someday earn their respect. Or at least, the right to exist without apology. But in our house, dreams were not judged by effort or sincerity. They were judged by how photogenic they were. Architecture and data science didn't photograph well. Influencing did. That's why, when Camilla declared at 14 that she wanted to be an influencer, event manager, or something creative in hospitality, Mom nearly cried from joy. "That's so perfect for your personality," she said, cupping my sister's face. "You're meant to shine, sweetheart. We'll invest in whatever you need." Dad agreed instantly. Better to put money where it'll actually show results. I knew what he meant. Results meant likes, comments, pictures, reactions, things Camilla brought in naturally. I brought in none. It became even clearer during prom season. Camilla was a sophomore then, too young to attend, but Mom insisted she needed a full styling session, just to see how she photographs in formal wear. They hired a stylist, bought her a custom gown, paid for a hair and makeup trial, and rented a limo for content. I watched the receipts pile up on the counter, hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands. I wasn't jealous of the dress or the attention. I was jealous of how effortlessly she was supported. When my own prom came 2 years later, I gathered the courage to ask for a simple dress. Not custom, not designer, just something modest that didn't look like I'd borrowed it from a thrift store. Mom barely glanced up from editing one of Camilla's videos. "Do you really need a new one?" she asked. "We just spent so much preparing for your sister's content last week." I tried again, softly. "I don't have anything appropriate to wear." Mom waved a hand dismissively. "Camilla is the one everyone looks at. It doesn't matter what you wear." Those words cut deeper than I realized at the time, not just because of what they meant, that I didn't matter, but because of how casually she said them, as if the hierarchy of our worth was a simple, natural fact. I wore an old dress that didn't fit quite right. I didn't tell anyone at school. I smiled through pictures. But inside, the truth grew heavier. In my family, I wasn't an investment. I was an afterthought. That truth became undeniable when the topic of college finally came up. My grandfather, Mom's father Harold, had created a trust fund when Camilla and I were still children. He had told me personally that half of it was mine for college. "For Lily's future," he'd said, pressing a peppermint candy into my hand while his eyes softened the way no one else's did. "You're going to go far, kiddo." It was the first, and for a long time, the only time someone in my own family told me that I had potential. When I turned 16, I asked Dad if I could see the trust fund statements. He sighed like I'd asked something frivolous. "It's being handled," he said. "Don't worry about it." But he never showed me the paperwork. Never mentioned it again. I didn't push, because in our house, pushing only made me the problem. Then came the moment that truly cemented my place in the family hierarchy. It was a warm spring afternoon, and I was washing dishes after helping Mom prepare snacks for a neighborhood gathering. I was halfway through scrubbing a stubborn pan when I overheard Mrs. Whitaker, the woman who lived 3 houses down, ask casually, "So, Lily's a junior now, right? What's she planning for college?" I froze. Dad laughed lightly as though the question amused him. "Lily," he said. "Well, she's still floating around." Floating around. The words hit me like a cold slap. Mrs. Whitaker chuckled politely. "Oh? I thought she was quite studious." "She tries," Dad replied. "But not everyone is college material. Camilla is our real promising one. She's got the spark. The presence." I remember the dish slipping slightly in my hands, the warm, soapy water turning cold against my skin. I stood there, invisible but exposed, listening to my father dismiss my entire future like it was obvious, like it was settled, like I had never shown an ounce of dedication. And then Mrs. Whitaker said something like, "Well, every child has their strengths," before changing the subject. But my father's words clung to me long after her car pulled away. When he came into the kitchen and saw me standing there, still holding the wet pan, his face barely shifted. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften his tone. He simply said, "Dry your hands, Lily. You're dripping water everywhere." I felt something shift inside me then, not anger, not even sadness. Just a quiet, suffocating certainty that in this house, I would never be more than what they had decided I was. I was the disappointment. And what made it even worse was that a part of me believed them, believed that my dreams were too big, too strange, too inconvenient for the daughter they wanted. Believed that Camilla's path mattered more because it sparkled on the outside. Believed that maybe I wasn't college material. That maybe I didn't deserve to be invested in. It would take me years, and an entire unraveling of the life I thought I knew, to realize just how wrong they were. Years to understand that their neglect wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of their blindness. And years more before I learned the truth about what really happened to the trust fund that was meant to give me a future. But the roots of it all, the favoritism, the erasure, the casual dismissal, were planted right there, in my teenage years, under the roof of a house where I learned to dream quietly, too quietly, until the day everything exploded. The summer before senior year ended with an envelope that should have changed everything. I still remember the way my hands shook as I tore it open at the mailbox. "Congratulations, Lily Hart," the letter read. I had been accepted into Colorado State University with a partial scholarship for an environmental engineering program, one of the top departments in the region. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like validation, like proof that all the hours in the library, all the late night studying, all the dreams I had whispered into the quiet corners of my childhood bedroom actually meant something. I walked into the house clutching the letter like it was fragile glass. Mom was arranging Camilla's blush palettes for a brand collaboration video. Camilla was practicing her smile in the hallway mirror. Dad was scrolling through emails. I stood there for a second, waiting for someone to look up, to notice. "I got in," I said finally. "Colorado State. They gave me a partial scholarship." For a beat, there was silence. Then Dad nodded slowly, barely lifting his eyes from his phone. "Good for you," he said flatly, as though I had announced I'd found a quarter on the sidewalk. "But you'll have to handle your living expenses. Rent, food, books. We can't stretch the budget right now." Mom chimed in without missing a beat. "We're saving for Camilla's future, sweetheart. Her program is expensive. Opportunities like hers don't come twice." Camilla didn't even pretend to hide her smirk. "Congrats, I guess," she said, scrolling through her notifications. "But, like, engineering? Doesn't really fit your vibe?" I wanted to ask what she thought my vibe was. Invisible? Replaceable? Not worth investing in? But I swallowed the words because in our house, honesty was treated as ingratitude, and ingratitude was treated as disrespect. What made it worse was watching, just a few months later, how effortlessly they poured money into Camilla's future. She hadn't gotten into CSU. She hadn't taken the ACT seriously, barely turned in her essays, and treated the entire process like background noise. But when she decided she wanted to attend a private college in California that specialized in hospitality and event management, Mom and Dad sprung into action. They signed the enrollment papers immediately. They toured campus with her. They rented a $2,400 a month apartment so she could live safely. They helped her furnish it with pastel decor and chic furniture because presentation matters. Dad placed the keys to a used but still luxury Audi into her hand as a starting gift. I watched it all quietly, each gesture carving into me the reminder that love wasn't scarce in my house, just selective. Meanwhile, I was counting bus schedules. I rented a room in a shared house with 2 other students and took the earliest morning bus to campus, an hour and 15 minutes if traffic was kind. I worked at a coffee shop from 5:30 to 9 a.m., then ran to class, usually arriving out of breath. Between classes, I worked shifts at the campus library, shelving books, resetting study tables, scanning IDs, answering questions from students who had no idea I was living off instant noodles and borrowed textbooks. I didn't complain. I wanted this. I wanted a future that felt like mine, even if I had to build it with blistered hands and borrowed dreams. But my body wasn't invincible, and exhaustion is a slow thief. It crept in quietly, first in my grades slipping, then in headaches that never seemed to go away, then in the tremble in my hands that the campus nurse insisted was just stress. I told Mom once on a rare phone call that I was having a hard time. She sighed. "Lily, everyone struggles. Don't be dramatic." Camilla added in the background, laughing. "Maybe college just isn't your thing." "That's okay. Just don't tank the vibe at Christmas." The final breaking point came when the landlord announced that rent would be increasing by $150 starting next month. It might as well have been $1,500. I stared at the notice taped to the fridge and felt everything inside me collapse inward. I was at the library that night shelving books when I realized I couldn't keep going. Not like this. Not while juggling 2 jobs, full-time classes, and a body that felt like it was running out of battery. I walked home in silence, the December wind slicing my cheeks, and drafted a message in my head over and over. When I finally called Dad, I prayed, foolishly, that some part of him would see me as someone worth helping. "I need to take a semester off," I said carefully. "I'll work extra jobs to save money. I'll come back. I just can't cover all the expenses right now." On the other end of the line, Dad exhaled the way he always did when he felt inconvenienced. "I told you this would happen," he muttered. "Not everyone is built for academics. Camilla has the presence, the ambition, the it factor. Well, don't force what isn't natural." My throat tightened. "Conchi can mat chutoi jian." "Or," Dad continued, "maybe this is the universe telling you to rethink your path. Some people just aren't meant for certain things. My dreams, my effort, my acceptance. All minimized to a cosmic accident." He hung up soon after. He had a dinner to get to. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall until my phone buzzed. It was a text from Camilla. "Stop being so dramatic. No one needs another failure at the Christmas dinner table." That was the moment something in me cracked. Not explosively, not loudly, but in a quiet, devastating way. A slow crumble, like an old building whose foundation finally gives way. I wasn't just exhausted. I wasn't just broke. I was unwanted, unsupported, written off. I packed my backpack with the essentials, turned off the lights in my small room, and sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the distant sound of students laughing outside. They sounded free, hopeful, young. I didn't feel like any of those things. I felt ancient, tired, hollowed out. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if my father had been right all along, if I really wasn't meant for college, or success, or anything more than being the convenient disappointment they had always shaped me to be. It took me years to realize how wrong that was, but in that moment, with rent overdue and my body failing and my family dismissing me like a burden, I felt the full weight of the identity they had carved into me. Failure. And I believed it. The room I moved into wasn't really a room, more like the leftover space someone decided to monetize. It sat above an old coin laundry on Colfax Avenue, the kind of street where sirens were part of the soundtrack and where the neon signs flickered like they were tired of trying. The stairs leading up to my unit creaked with every step, and when I opened the door for the first time, the smell of detergent and machine heat drifted up through the floorboards. But it was cheap, and it was mine. And after everything I'd just walked away from, mine felt like a luxury. My bed was a sunken twin mattress someone had left behind, covered with a thin blanket I found at a thrift store. The desk was wobbly, leaning slightly to the right like it was giving up on its purpose. My second-hand laptop overheated so loudly that sometimes I'd put it in the freezer for a minute just to cool it down. The walls were bare except for a single window overlooking a dumpster alley. It wasn't safe. It wasn't warm. It wasn't comfortable. But after years of living in a house where love came with conditions and validation was rationed like gold, the smallness of this space felt, strangely, like freedom. I could breathe here, even if the air smelled like bleach. At night, the thrum of the dryers downstairs kept me awake, a low mechanical heartbeat. The floor trembled slightly whenever someone overloaded a machine, but the vibration felt grounding, like a reminder that life was still moving, still humming beneath me even when I felt stuck. On my third week living there, something changed. The owner of the laundry, Mr. Ramos, a tired but kind man in his late 50s, was shuffling through receipts at the counter, muttering in Spanish. I had just come downstairs to use the change machine. When he sighed for the 5th time, I couldn't help but ask, "Is everything okay?" He showed me a messy stack of barely legible handwritten notes, machine repair slips, detergent invoices, and scribbled numbers. "Business is good," he said, "but I don't know where the money goes. Every month, I lose track." I don't know what possessed me. I was always taught to stay quiet, stay small, stay out of adult problems. But something inside me spoke up before I could stop it. "Do you want help organizing that?" He looked up. "You know how?" I didn't. Not formally. But I knew numbers. I knew systems. I knew how to find patterns. It was something my brain did automatically, like breathing. "I can try," I said. "No charge, just let me practice." He handed the pile to me like he was unloading a burden he'd carried for years. That night, I sat at my crooked desk with a $1 cup of gas station coffee and built a spreadsheet from scratch. I color-coded expenses, tagged machine numbers, categorized orders, and mapped out high-traffic hours. I didn't know it then, but that spreadsheet would become the blueprint of my future. 2 weeks later, Mr. Ramos called me downstairs, waving a printout. "Look," he said, eyes wide. His revenue had gone up. His supply waste had gone down. His machine repairs had become predictable instead of chaotic. "You have a head for this," he told me. "A real auditor's brain, analyst." Something like that. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not without comparison. Not with actual pride. His words didn't fix everything, but they moved something inside me, like someone had unlocked a window I never knew was sealed shut. After that, he insisted on paying me. Not much at first. $50 here, a small envelope of cash there, but enough for me to realize people were willing to exchange money for a skill I didn't know I had. Soon, the convenience store owner next door asked if I could help him make sense of his weekly inventory. Then, a small nail salon across the street asked if I could track their product usage. Word spread quietly among local shops. I wasn't a disappointment here. I wasn't not college material. I was useful, reliable, smart, a pattern interpreter, a problem solver. It lit something in me I hadn't felt in years. Not arrogance, not even confidence, but competence. The sense that I could take tangled chaos and turn it into clarity, that I could make things make sense. I began taking free online courses late into the night. Bookkeeping basics, Excel modeling, introductory financial analysis. Then I found a community college class on forensic accounting. Just one module, nothing fancy, but it cracked my world open. Forensic accounting wasn't about spreadsheets or taxes, it was about truth. About tracking the flow of money like following footprints in the snow. About uncovering what someone didn't want others to see. About telling a story with numbers, one that couldn't be twisted or gaslit away. I became obsessed. Nights blurred into each other as I worked the early shift at the laundry to earn discounted rent, then studied until 3 a.m., fueled by instant noodles and the hum of machines below me. My desk shook every time a dryer started up, but instead of irritating me, it kept me awake, pushing me forward. I scribbled formulas on sticky notes. I practiced recreating fictional fraud cases from textbook examples. I watched free YouTube lectures on data analytics. I built dashboards I didn't know how to use yet. There were moments, small, quiet ones, when I'd lean back in my chair at 2:30 a.m., eyes burning, brain buzzing, and for the first time in years, I would actually smile. Not because life was easy, it wasn't. Not because I suddenly had everything I needed. I didn't. But for the first time since childhood, I felt good at something. Undeniably good. And the world, even if only a tiny corner of Denver, was confirming it. Instead of failing, I was growing. Instead of collapsing, I was rebuilding. Instead of sinking, I was resurfacing. Slowly, painfully, stubbornly. It was a miniature peak. Nothing grand, nothing glamorous. But it was mine. And though I didn't know it yet, the skills I was cultivating in that cramped, vibrating room above a laundromat would soon collide with the very people who once told me I wasn't worth investing in. My past thought it had buried me. But all it had really done was plant me. My first few small bookkeeping gigs opened doors I hadn't even known existed. It started quietly. The bodega owner down the street told his cousin I was good with numbers. The cousin told a friend who ran a tiny dental clinic, and suddenly I was sitting at a cluttered desk surrounded by appointment cards, insurance statements, and mismatched file folders. What surprised people wasn't that I could organize their books. It was that I could see what they didn't. I noticed patterns. Why the clinic was overspending on supplies every third week. How the grocery store's cash drawer was always short on Fridays. Why the nail salon's product usage didn't match customer volume. I wasn't looking for fraud, not yet. I was just making sense of the noise. But clients whispered to each other about me like I was some kind of financial detective, and that word, detective, followed me quietly from one small business to another. Then came the project that changed everything. A struggling nonprofit reached out after hearing about me from the dental clinic. They suspected that one of their employees was mishandling donation funds, but they didn't have the budget for a major Denver firm. They asked if I could take a look. I expected messy receipts, misfiled invoices, maybe a forgotten vendor contract. What I found was a trail, thin, almost elegant, of tiny discrepancies spaced just far enough apart to look like human error, but they weren't. Each mismatch was carefully timed, always just before quarterly reports. A few dollars turned into a few hundred turned into thousands. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't just tracking numbers, I was uncovering intention. I prepared a simple report, color-coded, straightforward, with a timeline that exposed the pattern. The executive director was stunned. "How did you even see this?" she whispered. I didn't know how to explain it. The numbers talked to me. They formed shapes, roots, shadows. My brain filled in the blanks before I consciously understood them. Still, the nonprofit decided they needed a formal investigation. That was the day Noah walked in. I didn't notice him at first. I was leaning over the director's desk, trying to explain variance percentages again, using an analogy about grocery bags. He stood quietly by the door, listening. When the director introduced him, "This is Noah Harrington, our external forensic counsel." I assumed he was another lawyer who spoke only in legal jargon and carried sleek briefcases that cost more than my monthly rent. But he wasn't like that. He was observant, calm, kind-eyed. And then he asked me a question no one had asked before. "Can you walk me through how you found this pattern?" Most people wanted the conclusion, not the process. Noah wanted both. I walked him through each irregularity, each misaligned timestamp, each vendor inconsistency. As I talked, he didn't interrupt. He didn't look confused. He didn't dismiss anything. He watched me with this steady, grounded focus that made me feel, unexpectedly, heard. When I finished, he nodded and said, "That was one of the clearest financial breakdowns I've heard in months." The words settled inside me like warm sediment. After the meeting, when the others stepped out, he lingered. "Do you do this full-time?" he asked. I laughed. "This? No. I work at a laundry, sometimes a grocery store, sometimes whoever needs help." He studied me for a moment, as if recalibrating everything he'd assumed. "Have you ever thought about doing this as a career?" he asked. "Financial investigations? Forensic analysis? You see things most people overlook. That's not common." I shrugged lightly. "I don't have a degree." "Plenty of people in this field don't," he replied. "But they don't have your instincts. You have something that can't be taught." His words stuck with me long after he left. A week later, he emailed asking if I wanted to assist him on another small case. Not formally, just as a consultant. When I said yes, I assumed it would be a one-time thing. It wasn't. That case led to 2 more, then 5, then 10. Before I realized what was happening, our makeshift collaboration had turned into a quiet partnership. He handled the legal strategy, the courtroom language, the client-facing explanations. I handled the numbers, the anomalies, the hidden transfers, the silent trails left behind by people who thought no one would notice. We worked well together, uncomfortably well at times. In the beginning, I stumbled over my words when presenting. Noah never rushed me, never made me feel inadequate. He would say, "Start wherever you want, I'll follow." And he always did. As the months passed, we decided to do something neither of us had planned. We opened a tiny practice of our own. Just a 2-person operation at first, in a small rented office above an old bookstore. The paint peeled, the floors creaked. The heat worked only when it felt generous. But we had cases, and clients, and each other. Word spread that there was a new investigative duo in Denver who handled messy family trusts, suspicious guardianship withdrawals, questionable expense reports, and inheritance disputes. Noah presented the findings in court. I built the cases from the ground up. If money had a story, I could read it. If a pattern had a motive, Noah could prove it. We fit. Professionally first. Then personally. Somewhere between late-night case reviews and shared takeout dinners, our conversations drifted from work to life. He told me about his childhood in Oregon, about losing his mother young, about putting himself through law school. I listened more than I talked, especially when he asked about my family. It's complicated, I always said. Maybe someday. He never pushed. The shift from colleagues to friends to something more was almost imperceptible, like waking up one morning and realizing the season had changed overnight. He was steady in all the ways my past wasn't, considerate in ways I didn't know how to receive at first, and patient with the parts of me that were still healing. But even as we grew closer, I kept one door firmly locked: the story of my family. The story of who they had been to me. The story of what they had taken. I wasn't ready, not yet, to let him see that wound. Still, for the first time in my life, I was building something that wasn't defined by comparison, scarcity, or shame. I was creating a future shaped by competence, partnership, and quiet confidence. And though I didn't know it then, the path Noah and I were carving together would soon circle back to collide with the very people who once told me I wasn't worth investing in. The past wasn't done with me, but neither, it seemed, was destiny. The case that would unravel everything came to us on a quiet Thursday morning, one of those gray Denver days when the sky felt low enough to touch. I was in our office early, sorting through invoices and prepping reports for a guardianship dispute we were handling. Noah walked in a few minutes later holding a thick manila folder. I barely glanced up until I heard the tone in his voice: measured, serious, almost cautious. "We have a new intake," he said, setting the folder between us. "From an elderly client, complicated family trust issue, former stroke patient." That last detail made me pause. Stroke patients were vulnerable. Their finances were often left at the mercy of whoever held guardianship. Noah continued flipping through the first few pages. "His name is Harold Kensington Hart. He's accusing his daughter and son-in-law of mismanaging funds from a trust he set up years ago." I froze. Not noticeably, I hoped. "Hart?" I repeated, pretending I was only clarifying. "There are a lot of Harts in Denver," Noah said with a shrug, "but this one is fairly well known in the medical community. He was a surgeon before retirement. He set up a trust fund specifically for his first grandchild and—" Noah tapped the file. "There are signs of unauthorized withdrawals shortly after he suffered a stroke 6 years ago and was deemed temporarily incapacitated." My throat tightened. A surgeon, a trust fund, first grandchild, 6 years ago. The timeline circled me like a tightening noose, but I forced myself to stay composed. Noah didn't notice. He was still reading. "He thinks someone took advantage of his condition and drained a significant portion of the trust," Noah said. "He wants a full forensic review." He slid the folder toward me. "You should take point on this one. Your pattern recognition is sharper than mine." His trust in me felt heavier than usual, as if fate had placed a brick in my hands and whispered, "Open it." I pulled the folder close, but I didn't open it right away. Something in my chest resisted. Something old. Something familiar. But work was work, and I wasn't a child anymore. I unclasped the metal clip and unfolded the first page, and then my world cracked open. At the top of the page was an address. 73 Aspen Mill Road. My childhood home. The place where I scrubbed dishes and did laundry while Camilla posed for pictures. The place where Dad dismissed my college acceptance letter. The place where Mom taught Camilla to smile on cue. My hand began to shake. So subtly at first that I hoped Noah wouldn't notice. But when I flipped to the second page, The names stared back at me like ghosts. Elaine Hart, Richard Hart, my mother, my father. Noah was still pacing behind me, talking about jurisdiction, deadlines, potential subpoenas, but his voice faded into a dull hum. Every word on those documents burned like acid. Because the trust wasn't just familiar. It wasn't just any fund. It wasn't just a case. It was mine. Grandpa Harold had always been quiet, distant in a gentle way. But whenever he visited for holidays, he brought me books. Puzzle books, logic games, architectural sketch pads. He looked at me like I was someone worth investing in, even if my parents didn't. I was 11 when he mentioned a future fund he'd set up for me and my cousin. I remembered sitting on the floor with him while Camilla modeled outfits for the camera in the next room. "One day, this will help you chase whatever dream you choose," he'd said. I hadn't understood then, but I remembered the warmth of his voice. I remembered believing him. I looked down at the folder again, my pulse pounding in my ears. Trust Fund Beneficiary, Lillian May Hart. That was me. Pages of statements, transfers, authorization signatures, and withdrawal logs sprawled across the table. My father's handwriting appeared over and over, on forms approving tuition payments for a private college in California, on receipts for a business investment, on a lease agreement for a car. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Drained. Redirected. Gone. For Camilla. "Lily?" Noah's voice finally cut through. I didn't respond right away. He stepped closer. "Is something wrong?" My lips felt dry. My tongue was heavy. I forced the words out carefully, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile inside me. "This..." I swallowed hard. "This is my family." Noah froze. "What?" I pointed at the names. "Elaine and Richard Hart. They're my parents. Camilla. She's my sister." His eyes widened, shock flickering across his face. "Lily, I didn't know." "Neither did I whispered. "Not like this." He sat beside me, suddenly quiet. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." It was the only honest answer I had. I turned back to the documents and began flipping faster now, connecting timelines I had tried so hard to forget. 6 years ago, I was begging Dad for help with rent. 6 years ago, Mom said the family had to prioritize Camilla's future. 6 years ago, I was eating instant noodles between shifts. 6 years ago, I was dropping out of school because I couldn't afford housing. 6 years ago, the trust fund, my trust fund, was drained. They told me there wasn't any money, I whispered, a crack forming in every word. They said times were hard. They said I wasn't worth investing in because I wasn't college material. My throat burned. All that time, they were using my inheritance to pay for Camilla's private school, her apartment, her car. It was all there in black and white. Tuition payments labeled fall enrollment, CAM. Bank transfers labeled business project, CAM. A $17,000 withdrawal labeled vehicle purchase, GM. I remembered the Instagram post, Camilla posing with a white Jeep, captioned, "First car bought with my own savings." 3. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the pages apart. But I didn't move. I just stared. Because the betrayal wasn't new, but the proof of it was. The numbers matched every moment I felt abandoned, humiliated, dismissed. Every time Dad said they couldn't help. Every time Mom said they were saving resources. Every time I believed I wasn't good enough. Every time I thought I was a burden. Noah placed a steady hand on my back. Not pushing, not comforting in a way that asked anything from me, just grounding. "Lily," he said softly, "this isn't your fault." But the truth was heavy. My family didn't just choose Camilla over me emotionally. They did it financially, systemically, legally. They robbed my future to fund her present. And now, years later, the very skills I learned while surviving that abandonment had led me back to the scene of the crime. Fate wasn't poetic, it was ruthless. I exhaled shakily. What do we do? Noah paused before answering, his voice steady and certain. We investigate. Thoroughly. Carefully. And this time, he looked straight into my eyes. You won't be facing them alone. Something inside me broke then. Not in despair, but in awakening. Because for the first time, the numbers weren't abstract. They weren't someone else's story. They were mine. And they were finally telling the truth. The days that followed were a strange, disorienting blur, like walking through rooms lined with mirrors where every reflection forced me to confront a version of myself I had tried to forget. Each page of the trust file sat open on my desk, not as cold legal documents, but as evidence of a story I'd lived in without knowing the ending. I reread the withdrawal logs, the signatures, the timeline, again and again, trying to understand how I missed it all. For so long, I believed the worst things about myself. I believed I wasn't talented enough for college. I believed I wasn't worth financial support. I believed I was the safe, average, unremarkable child. I believed the world was right to hand Camilla everything while handing me nothing. But now the numbers told a different story. A truer one. I saw the exact month I dropped out of school circled on a statement, paired with a lump sum withdrawal my father signed to cover Camilla's private college deposit. I saw the week I begged them for help with rent matched with a business investment wired to her failed makeup line. I saw the date of her Jeep purchase, 2 days before I started my second job at the library. The betrayal was mathematical, precise, documented. My entire young adulthood, I thought life was punishing me. I thought maybe I just wasn't good enough to deserve help. But it wasn't fate that failed me. It was my own parents. I wasn't a failure. I was robbed. The realization hit me in waves: grief, anger, disbelief, and something deeper, sharper, more dangerous: clarity. One night, I sat on the office couch long after Noah had gone home, staring at the ceiling as the pieces fitted themselves into place whether I wanted them to or not. All those years, all those humiliations, all those quiet wounds, none of them were accidents. None of them were natural consequences. They were choices, my parents' choices. And that hurt more than anything. When Noah returned the next morning with 2 coffees, he found me still sitting there, hair undone, eyes red. He didn't rush to speak. He didn't overwhelm me with sympathy or advice. He just sat beside me and handed me the warmer cup. You don't have to decide anything today, he said gently. I let the steam curl upward, my hands wrapped tightly around the cup. What do I even do with this? I whispered. What does someone do when they finally see the truth like this? Noah leaned back, his voice steady and firm, the way it always was in court. Lily, this is guardianship fraud, financial exploitation, misappropriation of a minor's trust. It's not just family conflict, it's a crime. The word crime lingered in the air like smoke. It made everything real, too real. But they're my parents, I said, more to myself than to him. I don't want to destroy anyone's life. You're not destroying anything, he said. You're uncovering what they already destroyed. My breath trembled. He was right. They destroyed my education. They destroyed my safety net. They destroyed my sense of self-worth. They destroyed the version of me who believed their limitations were my destiny. But the child inside me, hurt, confused, still seeking a scrap of approval, hesitated. If I take legal action, it'll tear the whole family apart. Noah turned to me, eyes soft but direct. It was already torn apart, Lily. They just made sure you were the only one bleeding from it. The truth cracked something open inside me. For the first time, anger wasn't a flame. It was a quiet, steady heat. Controlled, clear, righteous. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for justice. But justice wasn't simple when it involved the people who raised you. The people who convinced you love was conditional. The people who'd let you starve for opportunities while feeding your sister with money meant for you. I spent days wrestling with it, lying awake on the couch, pacing the office hallway, flipping through documents until my vision blurred. Noah didn't push me. He didn't tell me what he thought I should do. He just showed up, ready to stand wherever I decided to stand. And then, as if fate wanted to script the next chapter with cruel precision, an email arrived. Subject: Christmas dinner. You coming home? It was from my mother. A message full of cheerful emojis and hollow warmth, bragging about Camilla's new fiancé. A successful real estate investor, apparently, and how they couldn't wait to show the family how well everyone is doing this year. She wrote it like nothing had ever happened. Like I hadn't spent years scraping by while they siphoned off my future. Like everything was normal. After that came a text from Camilla. Dress nicely this time. It's an important night for me. No, how are you? No, I miss you. Not even a perfunctory apology for anything she'd ever done. Just entitlement, polished and casual. The audacity was breathtaking. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar ache in my chest, the reflexive urge to shrink, to avoid conflict, to stay the good one. But then Noah read the messages over my shoulder. You don't owe them anything, he said quietly. You never did. Should I go? I asked, not sure what answer I wanted. He paused, thinking. If you want closure, yes. But if you go, I'm going with you. He picked up the trust file and tapped it once. And this time, you're not entering that house empty-handed. Those words anchored me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless child being summoned home for someone else's performance. I was an adult, a professional, a woman who had clawed her way out of the pit they pushed her into. I wasn't the disappointment. I was the reckoning they didn't see coming. As the day of the dinner approached, the anxiety sat deep in my stomach, but beneath it, a quiet strength took root. The truth was on my side. The numbers were on my side. And Noah, steady, unshakable Noah, was beside me. Whatever happened at that Christmas dinner would change everything. I could feel it. There was no going back now. Only forward. Into the fire. Into the truth. Into the moment where the past and present would finally collide. And somewhere inside me, beneath the fear, beneath the grief, was a part of me that whispered, let them see what they created. Let them see what they stole. Let them see me. The Hart House looked exactly the same as when I left it. Grand, polished, curated like a showroom rather than a home. The Christmas lights framed every window with magazine-level precision, and a 12-foot fir tree stood in the foyer, dripping with gold ornaments and ribbon spirals. I could practically hear my mother's voice in each detail. Make sure it looks successful. Make sure it looks enviable. The driveway was full. Mercedes, Lexus, BMW, and my father's pride and joy, a new Range Rover. Noah parked further down the street. Even from there, the house glowed like a promise it never kept. As we walked up the stone steps, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The same one I used to get at 15, when I was bracing myself for the subtle jabs and the louder disappointments. Noah squeezed my hand once, grounding me. We go at your pace, he murmured. I nodded, even though nothing inside me felt steady. The door swung open before we even knocked. Camilla stood there, dressed in a sparkling emerald dress, hair curled perfectly, makeup flawless. She looked exactly like someone who had grown up believing the world was her stage, and tonight, apparently, was her spotlight. "Lily!" she sang, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a photo op than affection. She didn't even look at Noah. The foyer was buzzing with people: my father's colleagues from the hospital, my mother's book club friends, neighbors, acquaintances. The entire night was a performance, and the audience had arrived early. "Coats go on the rack," Camilla instructed without warmth. "And Mom said you can start helping in the kitchen. She's behind schedule." I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already gliding away, greeting people, laughing too loudly, performing the role of the perfect hostess. Noah leaned toward me. "Wow," he whispered dryly. "She didn't even give me a chance to disappoint her." I almost laughed, but the knot in my stomach was too tight. Inside, the house smelled of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and something else: nostalgia mixed with dread. My mother, Elaine, stood in the kitchen wearing a designer apron she had clearly never cooked in. When she saw me, she gave a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Lily. Good, you're here. Can you arrange the bread rolls? And make sure the napkins are folded in the star shape, not the tree shape. Last year's photos looked messy." Not, "How are you?" Not, "How have you been?" Not even a real greeting. I folded the napkins quietly, letting conversations drift around me. Camilla's fiancé closed another deal, such a talented young man. "Did you see her charity gala photos? She looked stunning." "Poor Lily. Still single last time I heard?" Every comment was a pinprick. Noah lingered in the living room, politely answering small talk, though I could tell he was observing everything, every dynamic, every microaggression, every tone. Dinner was finally announced, and everyone filed into the grand dining room. The table looked like a magazine spread: long, elegant, over-decorated. I carried the breadbasket behind my mother, feeling once again like the family assistant rather than a daughter. As I set the rolls down, a woman I vaguely recognized squinted at me. "Lily, dear, what are you doing now? Still figuring things out?" My mother coughed into her napkin, trying to hide a smirk. My father didn't even look up. It was all so familiar it made my hands go cold. I returned to Noah's side, the only place in that room where my presence didn't feel like an inconvenience. When my mother clinked her glass for attention, always eager to open the evening with a toast, the room quieted. She gestured toward Camilla and her fiancé. "We're so proud of these two. Such a promising couple. Such a bright future." She spoke like a queen introducing heirs to a throne. I waited for her to mention my name. She didn't. After the toast, conversations erupted again. People complimented Camilla's dress, her hair, her ring, her fiancé's portfolio. I was fading into the background, a blur in a house that once felt like a cage. Noah noticed me retreating internally. He nudged my hand gently. "Whenever you're ready," he murmured. My heart hammered. My throat tightened. But I knew if I didn't introduce him now, my family would rewrite the narrative as Lily came home alone again. I stood up. "Dad, Mom, Camilla, everyone. I'd like you to meet someone." The chatter softened. Heads turned. A few bored expressions lifted with curiosity. I reached out my hand. Noah stepped forward. "This is Noah," I said, voice steady despite the quake inside me. "My boyfriend." The silence barely lasted a second. Then Camilla laughed. Loud, sharp, delightedly cruel. She looked Noah from head to toe: his plain boots, his minimalist jacket, the lack of flashy labels, and smirked. "This is who you're proud of?" she snorted. "Makes sense for our disappointment." My father let out a bark of laughter. My mother covered her mouth, giggling. Several guests exchanged amused glances. Someone muttered, "Oh dear," under their breath. The humiliation hit me like a slap. It wasn't new, but the intensity, the public spectacle, The casual cruelty, it collapsed every memory onto my shoulders. The prom dress rejection, the college dismissal, the not college material remark. The nights I cried on a bus ride home. All of it. All at once. Noah's hand didn't tighten or tense. He didn't stiffen. He didn't defend himself. He simply set down his wine glass with a soft clink that cut through the room, and then he looked around. Slowly, deliberately, meeting every gaze without flinching. Finally, his eyes landed on Camilla. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, almost conversational. "Funny," he said, "because starting next month, none of this will legally belong to any of you." The reaction was instant. Every laugh died mid-breath. Every smirk dropped. Every chair became suddenly still. A second ago, the room had been roaring with noise. Now you could hear the faint hum of the thermostat. My mother blinked. "Excuse me?" Noah reached into his leather bag and pulled out a thick folder, the same folder I had stared at for nights. He placed it gently on the table, right beside the rosemary turkey. He turned to me. "It's time they hear the full story, don't you think?" My pulse pounded in my ears. Every pair of eyes swung toward me. My father's annoyance flickered into something darker. My mother's smile tightened. Camilla's face paled slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. She sensed something shifting, something slipping out of her control. Noah remained steady beside me, a quiet force holding the line. The room wasn't laughing anymore. The performance was over, and the reckoning was about to begin. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was the faint clink of a wine glass settling unevenly on the table. My father's face stiffened, the muscles along his jaw tightening as if he were preparing to lecture a nurse for misfiling charts. My mother blinked rapid, shallow blinks, her social smile frozen unnaturally in place. Camilla looked from Noah to me, then to the folder on the table, her expression flickering between confusion and dawning fear. Noah rested one hand lightly on the file, not in a showy way, but with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly what he held. And then, in his calm, clean voice, the voice he used in courtrooms and boardrooms and tense mediations, he broke the silence. "Before we go further," he began, looking directly at my father, "I should properly introduce myself. I'm Noah Clark, attorney specializing in financial law and a forensic accountant contracted by the Kensington and Rowe Guardianship Review Division." He let that sink in for a beat. "For the past several months, I've been leading the investigation into the financial exploitation of Mr. Harold Kensington Hart, your father, Mrs. Hart, and more specifically, the mismanagement of a trust he established for his first grandchild, Lillian May Hart." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My mother stiffened. "What investigation? There's no investigation." Noah opened the folder and laid the first document neatly before her, my grandfather's original trust deed. "This," he said, tapping the paper lightly, "is the trust your father created. A fund designated exclusively for Lily, to support her education, her early career, and her transition into adulthood." Murmurs rippled across the table. My father's colleagues leaned in. A few neighbors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Noah continued, flipping to the next page. "And these," he revealed the first bank statement, "are the withdrawal records dated 6 years ago. The same semester Lily asked for assistance with tuition. The same semester she was told, and I quote, that the family had no available resources." My father straightened, a defensive scoff escaping his throat. "You don't have any context for those transactions. I handled them legally as guardian. Her grandfather wanted the money used responsibly." Noah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply turned the page. "Responsible use," he repeated. "That's an interesting phrase. Because these funds, meant for Lily's education, went to... He slid out the first highlighted section. Tuition payments for Camilla Hart's private college. A gasp came from someone at the far end of the table. Sarah, the woman from my mother's book club, clasped her hand over her mouth. Noah revealed another page. And this $12,870 withdrawal, labeled as a business opportunity, was transferred to Camilla's cosmetics startup. Another pause. Then he lifted the final highlighted line. And this $17,000 transfer? That one purchased a Jeep Wrangler, registered under Camilla, posted online as her first car bought with my own savings. He slid the printed Instagram post onto the table like the final card in a winning hand. The photo showed Camilla posing beside the Jeep, head tilted, smile bright, captioned exactly as I remembered. You could hear the embarrassment ripple through the room. Camilla's face flushed. That's not... I didn't... Dad told me it was a loan. He said Grandpa wanted to help me get established. Noah calmly pulled out a signed document. This is your receipt acknowledging the funds came from a family trust, specifically from Lily's benefactor account. And your signature is right here. He angled the page so the entire table could see. Camilla's breath caught. Her facade, the perfect daughter, the favorite child, the shining star, fractured visibly. My father slammed his palm on the table. That's enough. You have no right to bring this circus into my home. Noah met his glare without flinching. Actually, I do. He spoke the next sentence slowly, deliberately. Because next week, you won't be seeing me as the boyfriend of the disappointment. You'll be seeing me as legal representation for Mr. Harold Hart. And for Lily, the victim of the financial exploitation you committed under your guardianship. A heavy, suffocating silence swept through the room, the kind that comes right before the whole world tilts. My mother shook her head, her polished composure unraveling. No, this is a misunderstanding. We helped Camilla because she had potential. We couldn't just throw money at Lily's whims. Whims? Noah cut in sharply. He never raised his voice, but the room felt the weight of it. You told your daughter she wasn't worth investing in while spending her inheritance on cars, tuition, and failed ventures for her sister. Everything you're flaunting tonight, the jewelry, the vehicles, the wine you're pouring, comes from funds that did not belong to you. My father stood abruptly, pushing back his chair. Get out of my house. Before Noah could answer, one of Dad's colleagues, a distinguished radiologist, spoke quietly to his wife. We should go. Another couple rose, then another, then another. The discomfort was contagious. No one wanted their name attached to a brewing legal scandal. Chairs scraped, whispers spread. Someone muttered, "This is going to be bad," as they hurried for the door. My mother reached out as if to stop them, but her hand froze mid-air. Camilla burst into tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Dad, tell them it's not my fault. Tell them. My father looked from her to the documents to Noah, then to me. His expression a tangled mess of fury and panic. But he said nothing. Noah stepped back slightly, giving me space. This was my moment, my truth. Years of swallowing pain, years of forced humility, years of being dismissed, ignored, overshadowed. All of it led to this quiet, sharp clarity. I looked at each of them, my mother trembling, my father seething, my sister crumbling under her own lies, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like their disappointment. My voice was soft, steady, and devastatingly clear. All these years you called me your disappointment, while living off the future you stole from me. I folded my napkin slowly, placed it neatly beside my untouched plate, and stood. Behind me, Noah picked up the file with calm precision. My mother reached for me, frantic. "Lily, don't leave like this. This is all a mistake." My father's voice boomed after her. "If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back." Camilla sobbed my name, desperate. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out of the Heart House, the museum of expectations, the stage of my humiliation, the fortress of my erasure, with Noah by my side, and the truth, finally, in my hands. The cold night air hit my face like a baptism. It felt like the first breath of my life. The months that followed moved with a strange mixture of swiftness and gravity, like dominoes that had been standing for years suddenly tipping over in perfect, inevitable sequence. Once the investigation moved formally into the court system, everything my parents had buried beneath image, influence, and denial came to the surface. There was no spinning it. No pretty phrasing. No Christmas lights bright enough to hide what they'd done. Guardianship fraud wasn't something a judge overlooked, not when the paper trail was this clear and the beneficiary, me, had been denied her education while the money funded luxury and convenience for someone else. My father's anger shifted into desperation as attorneys entered the picture. My mother's composure fractured early. She cried in hearings, blamed stress, blamed misunderstanding, blamed my grandfather's poor communication. But the records were meticulous. My grandfather had been far more organized than they ever admitted, and the law was unforgiving. In the final ruling, my father was ordered to repay the trust in full, plus penalties for misappropriation and breach of fiduciary duty. Their home, my childhood home, the place where I folded napkins and scrubbed dishes and tried so hard to be enough, went on the market within weeks. The boat I was never allowed to step foot on was sold next. The mountain cabin they flaunted on social media followed soon after. Each listing felt like a stone being plucked from a wall that had confined me for years. Camilla tried to salvage her image, but her fiancé quietly disappeared from her life once the scandal gained traction. According to someone in Mom's book club, he said he couldn't build a future on a family that lies. Her influencer persona cracked. Brand deals evaporated. Followers dwindled. The perfect daughter facade, shiny, polished, untouchable, crumbled exactly the way fragile things do when they finally meet pressure, all at once. I should have felt triumphant watching it all unfold. Maybe a part of me did, but mostly, I felt something softer, quieter, steadier, closure. I wasn't rooting for their downfall. I was witnessing the truth reorder itself. And for the first time in my life, the truth was on my side. When the settlement funds were released, Noah and I sat together in the office, the same small plant-filled room where everything began, to read the final document. My name appeared again and again, not as the footnote in someone else's story, but as the rightful recipient of what had always been mine. "What do you want to do with the money?" Noah asked softly. I expected the question to overwhelm me. Instead, I felt clear. "Finish what I started," I said. So I did. I enrolled in a flexible online university program focusing on forensic accounting and data analytics. Not because I needed the degree to validate myself anymore, but because I wanted to finish the dream I once held in trembling hands. I wanted to claim the version of myself my parents said wasn't worth investing in. And I invested in her myself. At the same time, Noah and I expanded our practice. With the funds, we rented a modest but sun-bright office space in Portland. Large windows, soft rugs, countless potted plants, and a pair of desks that actually matched. We specialized in exactly the kind of work that had once crushed me, cases where someone's financial future had been stolen by the very people meant to protect them. Elder exploitation, inheritance fraud, mismanaged guardianships, hidden assets, victims who were told they must have misunderstood, victims who carried shame that was never theirs to carry. I didn't just work those cases, I understood them intimately. Clients trusted me because my empathy wasn't theoretical, it was lived. And that became my quiet power. That became the version of me I never knew I could be. Noah and I built a life together. Not lavish, not loud, but warm and intentional. Our apartment in Portland was small, filled with mismatched mugs and leafy plants and soft lamplight. Some evenings we worked side by side in comfortable silence. Other nights we walked in the rain, holding hands in the glow of street lamps. I learned what peace felt like, what safety felt like, what partnership felt like. And then, Christmas came. Not the kind from my childhood, where the air was thick with performance, comparison, and humiliation. This Christmas was smaller, quieter, softer. There were no photographers, no extravagant centerpieces, no guests invited for status. Just a handful of people who had become a chosen family, two of Noah's colleagues, a couple I had helped recover stolen retirement funds, and Mrs. Henley, a widow in her 70s, whose pension had been mishandled until we took her case and restored her security. She brought her famous cranberry bread and insisted on washing dishes despite Noah's protests. We ate simple, home-cooked food. We shared stories that didn't need to impress anyone. We laughed. Real laughter. Not the polished kind my mother curated for guests. At one point, I stepped back from the table, holding my mug of hot cider, just watching them. Watching Noah leaning forward with that familiar spark in his eyes, watching Mrs. Henley complain about the cold, watching two of our clients, now friends, talk about holiday travels. And something inside me shifted. This wasn't the Christmas stage where I stood as a prop for someone else's superiority. This wasn't the house where I was assigned chores while my sister played hostess. This wasn't a performance. This was a home. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was sitting at a table that I truly belonged to. I exhaled, slow and full. This, I whispered to myself, is the Christmas I deserved all along. Not glittering, not grand, but honest, warm, real. Later that night, after everyone left and the apartment was quiet, I spoke to the audience. The invisible listeners who always felt like the safest place to tell the truth. Blood isn't a free pass to exploit you. You're allowed to protect your future, your finances, your peace. You don't have to play the role of the disappointment just to keep harmony in a broken home. And then, like always, I asked the question that has become a bridge to anyone who's ever felt unseen the way I once did. If you've ever been called the disappointment of your family, tell me your story. And let me know. Where are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Because somewhere out there, someone is still sitting at the wrong table, in the wrong home, believing the wrong things about themselves. And maybe, just maybe, my story can help them get up and walk out the door too.